Hello my dear friends, you're on the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 23rd of April of 2023. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And of course, as usually, the most important and the most interesting updates are coming from Bakhmut. If we take a look at the Russian sources map, we won't find a lot of icons, a lot of updates from this area, but anyway, there are a lot of updates from this area. For example, the Russians are saying and the Ukrainians confirm this information, or the Ukrainians are saying and the Russian confirms that as a result of clashes, as a result of activity in the vicinity of Khromovo and so on, the Ukrainians took a decision to destroy the bridge that connected Khromovo with the Bakhmut. This bridge, if you remember, a few months ago, the Ukrainians have already destroyed this bridge, and they published a lot of video and photo confirmation of that. Later, they built a pontoon bridge in this area, and I understand that as a result of the fact that the Russians managed to establish control over this part of 0506 road, and now the Russians have like a primary access and primary road to this bridge, the Ukrainians took a decision to destroy even this pontoon bridge. So that means that from now on the Ukrainians are no longer able to use this area because they are no longer have any bridgehead, any road, any supply road through this area. The Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation reported that as a result of clashes in this area, the Ukrainians lost 200 soldiers, 13 armored vehicles, and 2 artillery systems, D-30, D-20, and Hrad system in the vicinity of Donetsk, all over the Donetsk front line. The losses, as you can see, according to that report, are not so heavy, are not so big, and this is very important. This is another part. This is another story we would like to discuss with you. But before that, let's return back, or let's go to the Russian deployment map. As you can see, this map has been updated. According to this map, we see that the Russians established 100% over entire northern part of the western Bakhmut. The Russians managed to develop their bridgehead along Tchaikovskого Street, and they got the residential area of the high buildings in this area. Furthermore, the Russians managed to develop and establish control over another few blocks on the south area of this western Bakhmut. Anyway, the situation for the Ukrainians and the entire conditions for the Ukrainians are getting worse and worse every single day. But as we can see, they still controls the western Bakhmut, and I believe that they are able to do this for the next few days or maybe even weeks. Another interesting update are coming from this area, and if you know, maybe you heard, maybe you saw that the head of Wagner, Prigozhin, the head of this private PMC, reported that from today, Wagners are not going to take or capture any prisoner of war. And he ordered, and this is not some kind of game, it's a real fact, he ordered by himself to kill anybody who is going to surrender from the Ukrainian side. And this is very important because, and the thing why he took such a decision was that recently from the Ukrainian side, there was some kind of video or maybe photo confirmation that the Ukrainians killed a wounded Wagner soldier. So there was a wounded Wagner soldier who was captured by the Ukrainians, and the Ukrainians took a decision to kill that soldier. And based on that, the head of Wagner took a decision from now on not to take anybody as a prisoner of war. So to kill everybody who is going to surrender. And to tell the truth, this is very important. This is a very important piece of news because you need to understand that this is a kind of a game. You need to understand that since the beginning of the storming operation of Bakhmut, as I understand, it's my complete understanding, it's speculation from my side, but I believe that Ukrainians were able to capture around 10-20 soldiers, Wagner soldiers per day as a prisoners of war. It's a war, it's a regular situation. The same statistic we could see from the Wagner side as well. Believe me, every single day the Wagners were capturing around 20, 30, 50 soldiers per day. It's a normal situation when there is a very close combat. But the question is, why have Wagners took such a decision just today? And this is the main question. Why? Do you think that today is the first case in this special military operation when the Ukrainians took a decision to kill a wounded Wagner soldier? Believe me, it's not. I believe that there may be thousands of cases since the beginning of the special military operation when the Ukrainian soldiers or Ukrainian military authorities took a decision to kill Wagner soldiers, wounded no matter what. You know that there were a lot of cases with many very I don't know. I don't want to discuss the cases when the prisoners of war from this or that side was killed by the opposite forces and so on. But the question is, why these days so important? Why these days so special? Why the Wagners took a decision to take a decision to not to take any more the prisoners of war. And as I understand, the main explanation of that is that when talking about the Ukrainian soldiers who are currently blocking the western part of Bakhmut, from now they have two options. At least they had, let's say before today, they had three options. The first option is to fight till the last portion of blood in their veins or something like this. This is the first option. The second option, to drop everything and to run away in direction of Chasov Yar. And the third option is to surrender. So three options. But we know that as a result of clashes during the previous days, the Russians managed to establish control over this part of 0506 road. And that means that, as we discussed, that road supplied and supported up to 60% of entire support of the western part of Bakhmut. So we understand that from now on, it's just a matter of time when the western part of Bakhmut is going to fall. Everybody understand this. So we understand that. So there are same three options, but Wagner's told the head that from now on we are not going to take anybody as a prisoners of war. And Wagner just wants to make a panic among these forces. He wants these forces to start panic and to start running away. Because the forces that are blocked in this western part of Bakhmut, or soldiers in this area, think like this: I will fight, but if time comes, I will surrender and everything is going to be fine with me. And of course, this is not very good for Wagner's, because from one side they need to fight, they need to spend a lot of resources, a lot of time, and if they're able to capture somebody, they need to take care of them. So this is some kind of media and psychology war that is very successfully managed by the Wagners. I don't think, and I don't know what exactly the Ukrainians are going to do after this piece of news, but I believe that this is a very bad piece of information, and many of the soldiers, a lot of soldiers who are currently blocking this area, will take a decision to run away. And this is exactly what Wagner's want by this announcement, that they're not going to capture anything or to leave alive anybody. They want to make a panic and they want to force, because they're also tired. During the previous months, they had a lot of losses as well. Don't doubt about this. But anyway, this is also not the most important thing I would like to discuss with you today. For example, the Minister of Defense of Russian Federation reported that as a result of clashes in Bakhmut, the Ukrainians lost just 200 soldiers. And to tell the truth, this is the lowest level of the losses in this area for the previous week. Exactly a week ago, on the 16th of April of 2023, the Ukrainians reported that as a result of clashes in this area, they lost 145 soldiers. Before that, they lost a little bit more, but anyway, we see like a small pause or something like this. But from the other side, we see that the Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation reported about significant increase of the losses of the Ukrainians on the Kupiansk front line and South Donetsk and Zaporozhye front line. When talking about South Donetsk and Zaporozhye front line, sometimes the level of losses is very high, sometimes they're very low. It's very difficult to understand. There is some kind of these front lines are overpopulated from both sides, from the Ukrainians, from the Russian side. But when talking about Kupiansk front line, this is very interesting piece of information. As you can see, there are a lot of icons in this area and so on. And if you remember, I told you that we need to pay more attention to the Kupiansk front line, because the level of loss in this area is very high, is too high in comparison with the previous period of time. For example, today the Russians are saying that as a result of clashes, the Ukrainians lost 95 soldiers. For example, yesterday they lost 60 soldiers, the day before yesterday 60 soldiers, and so on. And you know that when talking about the same front line a month ago, the Ukrainians' losses was on the level of 30-35 soldiers per day. And now we see the increase of intensifying of the Russian activity in this area. From one side, the Russians are trying to break the rotation process of the Ukrainians in this area. From the other side, they're trying to solve the issues in Dvorechna, in Sinkovka, and they try to develop their bridgehead, trying to destroy the commandos groups of the Ukrainian side, because there is a very big forest in this area and so on. But also, no changes on the ground. I expect that the Russians are going to start movement in this area, and they will try to develop this bridgehead in direction of Sinkovka and Dvorechna, and they will try to break the Ukrainian plans, I don't know, in this area as well, because furthermore the Russians are saying, and this is also a very interesting piece of news, that during the previous 24-48 hours the Russians increased in the activity in Kharkiv. They start bombing this town heavily. They're trying to bomb the accumulation of Ukrainian forces, the possible disposition or location of Ukrainian factories, Ukrainian industrial zone that Ukrainians are using to produce more tanks, repair tanks, some service centers and so on. So possibly this is the sign that the Russians either are planning to start some kind of activity in this area, or they're trying to force the Ukrainians to change their focus in this area and to send more reserves to this area. But maybe this is some kind of false flag. When talking about Liman front line, there are no changes. Not that changes, the level of Ukrainian losses are reducing every single day. And for example, today the Russians are saying that as a result of clashes, the Ukrainians lost just 70 soldiers, 3 armored vehicles and 2 artillery systems. So the level of losses is very low in comparison with the period of situation when the Russian went storming like Paraskoviivka, the north of Bakhmut. If you remember those days, the Ukrainians were losing up to 300 soldiers per day in Bakhmut and around 200 soldiers in this area as well. The Russians were trying to freeze, to pin down the Ukrainians' 81st Air Mobile Brigade, 95th Brigade and 25th Brigade, 14th Brigade in this area. They were trying to freeze them, to pin them down and not to allow them to be flexible, mobile, and not to allow the Ukrainians to send these forces to the south, to Bakhmut. Currently, the Wagners, by capturing most of the strategic position in Bakhmut, solved the issue, solved their old things they needed to solve, and after that the Russians took a decision to reduce the activity in this area as well. They managed to advance, they managed to capture more territories, a bigger bridgehead. Now they need just time to solve their issues, to make rotation process, to get more supply and support, and after that they will be able to become more active in this area as well. So one more time. Furthermore, the Russians are saying that as a result of clashes, artillery duels, artillery attacks of air forces, artillery systems, they managed to destroy the headquarters of the Ukrainian forces in Serebryanka, the town of 58th Brigade. Furthermore, they managed to destroy the positions and to attack and reduce and destroy Ukrainian manpower in Verkhnyokamyansk of 51st 4th Brigade in this area. As a result, also the clashes, as we discussed, they managed to break few rotation process, they destroyed few warehouses and so on. Now let's go to Donetsk. As you can see, there are also a lot of icons. The Russians continue storming Nivoyska from the south, from the east. But for now, there are no progress in this area. It's very difficult to explain why is that. I believe the Ukrainians do have a lot of manpower, forces in this area. So we'll see. I believe the Russians need a few days. And after that, they will capture this town for 100%. Very interesting updates are coming from Zaporozhye and South Donetsk areas. You can see there are a lot of icons, and one more time, the Russians are saying that as a result of clashes in this area, the Ukraine lost 130 soldiers, 5 armored vehicles, and 1 artillery system. Furthermore, additional report of the forces in this area reported that as a result of some kind of duels and so on, the Ukraine lost additionally 16 soldiers and 2 armored vehicles. The Russians themselves are saying that as a result of some kind of advanced actions, they managed to develop and advance to the west of Niskuchная, and they established control, as I understand, over this forest. And now they're trying to encircle Nivolsk and Velika Novoselovka from the west, trying to develop and advance to the north along the forest line and just to capture this area. We'll see. Maybe the Russians are trying just to reduce the gray zone and to prevent any action from the Ukrainian side in the future from their counteroffensive operation, or possibly they're trying to encircle. They were defeated, the Russians were defeated in Ugledar. Currently Ugledar is reduced to ruins, and now maybe they want to solve this issue by developing and moving to the north of Niskuchny and Vremivka tactical bridgehead. We'll see. Anyway, we'll see. And now let's go back and let's discuss one more time the Kherson area. As we discussed, the Ukrainians, according to their sources, according to their Telegram channels, military experts managed to cross the Dnipro River and to capture these small villages, like not villages, residential area of Dachi, Kindika. You need to understand that these villages were in the gray zone. The main Russian positions are located in the town, very big town to the south of this position, in Alyoshki, in this area. So we see these towns, this residential area. And even if the Ukrainians launch their counteroffensive operation in this area, before reaching the outskirts of this town, first they need to cross at least 2 rivers. The first river is River Gnilusha, this one, and the second river is River Konka. So there are a lot of things to do. And to tell the truth, yes, this bridgehead is very important. Anyway, this bridgehead is very important. And I'm not saying that the Russians don't need to pay attention to this area. They need. For example, currently today, the level, and we need to understand this bridgehead from the level of grass. Currently, this is the beginning of the spring, and currently the level of grass is very low. Very low. It's highly unlikely the Ukrainians are going to start movement to the south. But believe me, this is the worst situation, and nobody is cutting off this grass. Nobody is reducing the level of grass. They're growing every time. And this area is located between the Dnipro rivers and many other rivers. And believe me, in 2 months, the level of grass will be so high so that Ukrainians will be able to hide even tanks in this area. And they will do this, because the distance between the Kherson and this bank of the river is around 800 meters. And we know that the Western countries, especially in particular Germany, supplied Ukraine with a lot of special vehicles that are able to build bridges. And in a month, I expect that in a month or in 2, the Ukrainians are going to build the real bridges in this area, and they will start sending tanks on this bank of the river. And after that, this is going to be a very big problem for the Russians, but not today. Not today, not in a week, not in 2 weeks, but somewhere in 2 months. So let's say, assume that in the end of June, if the Russians are not able to push the Ukrainians back from this bank of the river, believe me, in 2 months, this bridgehead is going to become a real disaster for the Russians and another point of pressure on their defense positions. As I see, according to the Russian sources, they're not paying attention to this area. I see that the Russians are saying that this is not so important and they don't need to worry about. But I expect, one more time, that in 2 months, this bridgehead can become a real pain for the Russians. And now it is better to solve the issue of this bridgehead today, but not in 2 months, when the level of grass is going to become more than 2 meters in their height. We'll see what is going to be next. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds you to condemn any violence in Ukraine. Thank you for watching, subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.